Hey guys, welcome to Interesting Video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with the patch 5.2D breakdown. So of course, ever since Riot changed to the basically 3 updates in a year for 4 big events, we always have D patches nowadays, so we're gonna get into it. There are a number of interesting changes that we have over here, but we'll cross the bridge when we get there. So first up, the events. Now all of these events are already live with Milio's arrival, the Wild Pass Sprint, as well as the rotating game modes event. All of them are already live, as I just mentioned, so can participate in those if you guys like. So we finally gotten the Kale rework. Now if you guys remember, originally when they announced like patch 5.2 in the video, they announced like reworks for like champions like MF, Master Yi, Jax, Kale, and Riven, things like that. Actually, I'm not even sure if Kale was announced, but it may or may not have been. But anyways, they all have been slowly coming out one at a time, and I think the Kale rework is really interesting. Okay, so first up, the level that you need to be ascendant is lowered, so now it's gonna scale with your ultimate. So last time it used to be levels 5, 10, and 15, so every 5 levels. Now it's 5, 9, and 13. So basically, it's every time you rank up your ultimate, you are going to evolve. Now this is really significant because Kale's second evolution and final evolution matters a lot in terms of her power level. So getting it like 1 level earlier over here and 2 levels earlier over here is really huge, right? This could be like, for example, level 15 to level 13 could be like a couple of minutes difference between getting your final form and not getting your final form. This definitely does make her a lot better. But she's also gotten changes to almost all of her, basically all of her abilities actually. So first up, the armor and magic resist you get from your Q is going up from 15 to 20%. Now this is mainly because Kale doesn't actually build armor or magic resist because she does mix damage. So generally, she's just gonna go for pure items and no armor or magic resist reduction. So this is basically to make up for it. That does make sense. The damage is going up by like 10 at all ranks, and this is kind of a common trend. So damage goes up by 10 at all ranks. The healing here goes up by 10 at all ranks as well, but here you get a 40% extra AP ratio on the healing. Now, you've never really used W for the healing in general. The W is more so for the movement speed and maybe healing in the clutch, but the W on kill is like more for the movement speed than really for the healing. So of course, this is gonna be a good thing for Kale players, but it doesn't matter that much. Now this E now does only 60% damage to monsters. So what does this mean? Well, this basically means that Riot doesn't want Kale in the jungle. They want her in a lane like mid or top, but they don't want her in the jungle, which is why they're killing her jungle clear by reducing her E damage, which is what she normally starts. So I'm not sure if this will kick Kale out of the jungle, because I have a suspicion that even though your clear might be really bad, kill jungle was always like really bad in the sense that every other jungler could just come in and kill her, kind of bad. But her kill clear being a little bit slower, I'm not sure if that will really be the difference of whether Kale does or does not play in the jungle. So next up is her ult. So this is where it gets really interesting. So first up, the channel time is shortened from 1.5 seconds to 0.5 seconds, and the time of blades falling is prolonged from 1.5 to 2.5. So firstly, this means that you can cast it faster, although I didn't really think it was slow in the first place. But next up, instead of having only 1.5 seconds of invulnerability, I'm assuming that you now have 2.5 seconds of invulnerability. Now, if this is true, 1.5 to 2.5, that is huge. Now, I have heard from leaks on the PBE that during this time you can auto attack, but the blades don't do damage. So you have to take note here. Is it time of blades falling? It doesn't actually say the damage, anything about the damage of the blade. So I've heard that the blades no longer do any damage. Now, if that's true, if the blades don't do any damage, but you can auto attack for 2.5 seconds while being invulnerable, I actually think that that's fair. It's a little bit weird, but I think it's fair, because imagine a late game kill. You're basically an ADC. Imagine an ADC being able to free hit for 2.5 seconds without taking any damage. I think that is really insane. So I think Kale did get a really huge buff. However, we do have to take note that none of these buffs help out her early game very much. I mean, yeah, you get like extra 10 damage, you get extra 10 heal, but I think her early game is still gonna be trash. So Kale still has the same problem, same strengths and weaknesses, which is that she sucks in the early game and she's really strong in the late game. So I'm not sure if she will really be played. Now, On the other hand, the supports. Now we all know that I always rank Yuumi and Lulu as pretty much the two best enchanters, and they are both getting hit this patch. So first up, Lulu. So first up, we have Pix the Fairy Companion, which is that little fairy that you attach to your ADC when you buff them. So the damage that it is doing is getting reduced from base 7.5 plus 7.5 per level to 6 plus 6 per level. So that's 1.5 each. 1.5 from the base damage and 1.5 every level. Now, this damage does actually matter because your ADC uses this damage to deal mixed damage, like deals magic damage from Pix. So hitting this damage a little bit is going to make Lulu's like buffing capabilities in terms of buffing her ADC's damage a little bit weaker. But the bigger change, I think, is the wild growth cooldown. So at rank 1, it's going from 75 to 80, which is not too bad. But at rank 2, it's going from 60 to 70, and at rank 3, it's going from 45 to 60. Now, 45 to 60 is a pretty huge nerf. Like 15 extra seconds you have to wait. It's a pretty huge nerf. That's an increase, by a very decent amount. So, technically speaking, the cooldown is longer, but the numbers didn't actually change. So, I still think Lulu will be very good, but this does definitely bring down her power level a little bit. I think if you want to hit Lulu, the main thing you want to hit is probably her E or her W, like either the attack speed on her W, movement speed on W, or maybe the amount of shielding on her E. But either which way, this is still a pretty good nerf to Lulu. Now, Yuumi also gets a pretty good nerf. Now, first up, her base AD is going down by 8. Now, I actually kind of don't really think this is going to matter at all, because Yuumi actually can be very good at early levels if you detach and auto attack, because her base attack damage is really high. So this is targeting that. But the thing is that, how many Yuumi players have you actually seen that detaches and auto attacks? Pretty much none. So this really doesn't matter at all. Except for the people who like play Yuumi optimally, which is like small, like 1%. So next up, the shield. So the shield, the base amount is going down from 50 to 35. And the scaling is going down from 25% AP to 15% AP. Now this is a very, very decent nerf to the shield. Now base amount is going down by nearly half, and the AP scaling is hit by like 10%. So this is a really decent nerf. The shield's going to be quite a bit smaller. And then her E, which is her basically her shield and her E is basically Yuumi's like two best parts. Her E, movement speed, is going down in terms of AP percentage. Now, 0.05% to 0.03%. Now 0.05% is kind of irrelevant in the first place. So this is basically like 15 in general. Like 0.05%, it is literally nothing. Like let's imagine a scenario where you're not ever gonna have this much AP, but let's say you have like 200 AP, right? So then you like 0.05% of that is 0.1 like AP. So this nerf is completely irrelevant because only the 15% actually matters. But here is the part where it matters. The attack speed gain is getting reduced. So it's getting reduced by 10% in all ranks. So this, I think Yuumi got hit way harder than Lulu because I think they hit Yuumi in the areas that she's the strongest at, which is her shield and her E. Her E is basically most of her power budget. So her E gets hit both in movement speed and in attack speed, which is why I thought they should probably do for Lulu as well in terms of her W and her E. But yeah, Yuumi is taking a big hit. Now Yuumi, I think, I'm not sure how popular she is because I permaban Yuumi personally. I hate playing against Yuumi, but I'm not sure if this nerf is going to bring her in line because this is a pretty hefty nerf. I think this will definitely take her down a peg. Now Set is actually getting a buff, so his base AD is going up by 4, sorry, I can't do math, but it goes up by 4, a really decent amount. And the Haymaker, which is his main damage ability, the W, right, is going up in terms of the percent. So again, it's going from 0.25 to 0.275 bonus AD. Again, I think that when you go to these kind of like 0 point somethings, it's not really gonna matter all that much. It's just marginal increase. And here is what I think will matter more. The upper limit of grid stacking is going from 45% max health to 50% max health. Now that the grid stacking is that bar you see charge up under him. Now this is going to allow his bar to charge up more, and this in turn is going to lead to more damage from the Haymaker. So I think that is where it is going to actually matter more, right? The extra 5%. Overall, I think it's a pretty decent buff. Not huge, not lil. Pretty decent buff. Now Syndra, I think, is also getting a really decent buff. So first up, her health per level is going up from 96 to 104. So over time, this is going to be a lot of extra health, plus 8, plus 8, plus 8. And then her passive transcendence. When you level up abilities used to gain 2 splinters, now you're gonna actually gain 4 splinters. So this basically means it used to be 30 and now it's actually 60, so it literally doubles the splinter amount that you get, which of course leads to you getting your evolutions faster. So I guess they've found that Syndra is a little bit too slow in terms of getting her evolutions, which I don't really agree with. I think it was fine, but this allows her to get her evolutions a little bit faster. And I also think Syndra is actually pretty strong, but I think people are not very good at playing Syndra. But anyways, she's getting a bunch of buffs. So the damage from each Dark Spear is going up slightly at the later ranks. Particularly the highest rank where it goes up by 10, which is 10 damage per spear. So if you hit them with like 5 spears, it's like 50 extra damage, which is pretty huge. So of course, correspondingly, the max damage is going to be scaled up. This is basically like, of course, accounting for each spear. And then the explosive damage when you take someone down, which is the evolve that you get when you hit certain splinter amounts. Explosion damage is going up by a little bit as well, but overall it's not a very huge buff. It is a pretty okay buff, because when you consider it's per spear, you know, it is gonna add up as you hit more spears, but it's not like a huge buff. Now Ornn, I can't believe Ornn is getting buffed. Really? So Ornn's base AD is going up by 4 as well, right? So that's gonna help him a lot in lane. His Rupture, which is the Q, the damage is actually going up by 10 at all ranks. Now this is going to matter a lot at the early ranks, because 15 to 25 matters a lot more than 120 to 130. And this actually matters because I think you max this last, right? I think you max W, E, then Q, if I'm not wrong, on Ornn. So I think this is actually a pretty huge buff, because getting extra 10 base damage on your 1.1 durability is always going to be huge. The W, the Bellows Breath, the damage you do when someone is fragile is going up by 2%. And the minimum damage to minions is going up by 10 as well. Now, I think this is a little bit dangerous, because if you guys remember, when Ornn was very strong, the main thing they kept nerfing was his brittle damage, you know, in terms of the W and just things like that. So I think it's a little bit dangerous, because I do still think Ornn is one of the best top laners in the game, and I think that, you know, buffing him on multiple aspects is a little bit dangerous. So next up item, Ravenous Hydra. Now I have to be honest, I have only ever seen one person build Ravenous Hydra in like the entire time I've been playing since it's been released, and I really didn't think it did anything. So I'm not saying it didn't do anything, but it was not very noticeable. So it used to deal adaptive damage, scaling off of AD and AP, and restore health by 30% of the damage dealt with a 6-second cooldown. So this is really meant to be used very, very often, almost like another ability. And now they're actually changing it to instead deal more damage, which is 140% AD and 30% AP, and restore health by 60% of the damage dealt, which is a lot more health restore, but it has a 10-second cooldown now. Now, the thing is that I don't necessarily inherently think this enchant is bad, right? I think that it is a pretty good enchant, but the issue is that it's competing with so many other enchants, right? So if, like, generally, I think the target audience of this enchant is the top laner. So let's say champions like Jax or Camille, you know, Fiora, champions like these. But I don't really see why you want to build this, right? You have so many better options. You know, you have like Stasis, you have TP, you have Quicksilver enchant, and for Camille you have like Meteor, and like there's so many other options. Like the enchant like category has too much competition. Right, like that's why like Redemption pretty much like was rarely built on supports, because if you're a healing and shielding champion, then something like the revival enchant would be better, or if you're like a tanky champion, you would probably be going for the locket, and Redemption eventually got converted into an item with a passive. So there's just too many items competing for that slot, which is why some enchants just never get like taken, like the Repulsor, like the Magnetron, like they are never actually built by anyone. I think this is one of those enchants that kind of fall victim to that, because if it's not like the top tier enchant, why would you build it instead of building one of those top tier enchants, right? But we'll see if this change actually matters, because this is a pretty strong enchant from what it looks. So yeah, so ARAM is getting a bunch of changes. I'm just gonna scroll through them. If you guys want to see, you can of course take a pause. So here, this is where I think we get into the most interesting change, GALIO'S AEGIS. They did state it's a limited time beta, so this is not a permanent feature. It's just going to be a while. So, players that lose a match will not lose rank if they achieve an S level rating. Wow. That is a really, really huge change. Now, firstly, there's a number of things to discuss. So I think myself, like most people's first thought was that, wow, that's amazing, right? Because you don't get punished if you play well and you lose a match, right? But I think that when you think deeper to this, there's actually a few layers. Now, firstly, how common is it that someone actually gets an S rating and they lose the match? It's generally not very common. Of course, it does happen, which is why you would say that, this change does make sense because you played very well. You don't deserve to lose your rank, right? But now I want to propose a counter argument to this. So let's say if you are a Fed ADC, let's say I'm like 12 and 0 as an ADC, right? My whole team is feeding, right? My whole team is feeding, and I need to be there to carry the game in order for my team to win, right? So if I win, I'm going to be getting 1 mark. And if I lose and get an S, I will lose no marks. So now I have a conundrum, right? Do I play for the win to get that 1 mark, or do I guarantee that I don't lose a mark by playing safe and not dying? Because sometimes 1 death is what changes your ranking from an S to an A, right? So there is a scenario where, for example, my team could have won the fight if I participated in it and put my life at risk to win the fight for my team and play for the win. But I don't want to do that because I'd rather just guarantee I don't lose a mark. And then as a result, I ditch my team, my whole team dies, the enemy team ends the game, I get an S, I don't lose a mark, my whole team loses a mark other than myself, the whole enemy team gains a mark, and essentially for myself, for the ADC, yes, I kind of quote unquote won by not losing a mark, but I think it kind of defeats the spirit of the game where you want to play for the win and not play for the S level rating. I think this is a very dangerous change. So yeah, I will have to see how this shakes out, but once again, as I said, getting an S is pretty rare, so this may not actually matter all that much in the grand scheme of things, but I think it's a little bit dangerous. So yeah, basically another change is that when they lose a match and they get an A, they're going to be compensated for 50% of the current rank fortitude. So basically, again, this is just encouraging good like playing to win even though you're losing. And I actually think this change is really good compared to this one, because don't lose ranking is very dangerous, but getting compensated for 50% of the current rank fortitude, I think, is a little bit more reasonable. Although you could argue that there's the same phenomenon of people who want to maintain an A and play for KDA and things like that. But I think that getting compensated for rank fortitude and having rank loss shield cards and event compensating for loss, all that triggering first, I think that this is a little bit more fair than the S rating one. Yeah, so obviously you have to hit this certain criteria, which is pretty logical. Like pretty much everyone's gonna hit this criteria majority of the time. And yeah, so there are Star Guardian skins that will be coming out pretty soon. But that's pretty much it for the patch. Yeah, I think this is obviously the biggest change, affects everybody. But yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, guys, and goodbye.